They fined me $4,800 for unauthorized construction on a common waterway, even though the lake was deeded to the original ranch parcels long before the HOA existed. On day 14 of their deadline, I found a clause they never read, one that made every board vote since 2019 void. Welcome to my channel. I'm Daniel Hurst, a civil engineer out of northern Colorado, the kind of guy who keeps every receipt and every blueprint. I tell true HOA stories that prove knowledge is stronger than intimidation. If you're new here, hit subscribe, especially if you've ever been fined for something ridiculous. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing what states these battles come from. I'd moved to Echo Ridge 2 years after my wife Marcy passed. She'd wanted quiet. No sirens, no highway noise, just water and light. So I bought the last lakefront parcel on the South Bend, a modest acre with a dock and a promise carved into the closing papers, non-navigable, private-use lake rights conveyed with property. I read every page, even the fine print printed in 6-point font that smelled like toner and rain. The HOA hadn't existed when those rights were recorded. It came later, a group of concerned homeowners led by a man named Kent Wilmore, a retired consultant with a shaved head and a smile that never reached his eyes. At first, he'd wave when I walked my dog. Then he started forwarding emails about lake uniformity initiatives. By March, I received my first violation notice. Unapproved structure, dock rail color non-compliant. It was tan cedar. They wanted community standard slate. I paid the $50 fine just to keep the peace. But when I began assembling my floating cabin, a small solar-powered office where I could work away from the clutter of the house, the tone changed. Kent himself walked down my driveway, clipboard tucked under his arm like a badge. "You'll need to read. Move that platform," he said, pointing toward the half-finished float. "It violates Section 8.3, no permanent or semi-permanent structures on community water." "Community?" I said. "You mean my deeded pond?" He smiled, showing the kind of teeth that love paperwork. "All properties around Echo Ridge are subject to the declaration. We manage the aesthetics and usage for everyone's benefit." When the sheriff's cruiser rolled up 3 days later, lights on, but siren silent, I realized this wasn't going to be one of those easy HOA stories that end with a compromise. The deputy was polite, even embarrassed. He said he was responding to a trespass complaint filed by the Echo Ridge Association. I handed him my title binder. "You can tell them," I said quietly. "This pond is older than their bylaws." He looked, nodded, and left. Still they doubled down. Citations stacked. $100 per day of non-compliance. Certified letters about escalation to legal counsel. They called it a safety hazard. What they meant was they couldn't control it. That night, I sat in my cabin, the walls barely paneled, the air thick with cedar dust, and read the declaration again. There was an asterisk next to common waterway that referenced Appendix D, easement exceptions. Except there was no Appendix D in the binder the HOA had ever circulated. Gravel crunched outside. A car idled. I glanced through the window slats. Kent's SUV sat at the end of the drive, engine running, his silhouette lit by the dash glow. He stayed 5 minutes, then drove off. By morning, I decided to fight on their level, paper for paper. I visited the county recorder's office in Loveland, asked for every plat, covenant, and amendment ever filed under Echo Ridge LLC. The clerk, an older woman with bifocals on a chain, slid 3 heavy folders across the counter. "People don't usually ask for the originals," she said. I found the missing appendix. It wasn't missing at all. It had been omitted when the HOA refiled its consolidated version in 2019. Appendix D listed parcels 1 through 7 as retaining pre-existing riparian privileges in perpetuity. I was parcel 6. That clause meant my water rights, use, structures, even minor anchoring were outside HOA jurisdiction. Knowledge nugget number 1. In most states, an HOA cannot override pre-existing recorded easements or deeded rights without a supermajority vote and explicit owner consent. Paper beats policy every time. The realization hit like caffeine through a bad morning. I didn't need to beg. I only needed to document. So I made copies, time-stamped, certified, notarized. Then I waited. The HOA's next move came as a final notice of enforcement, a 9-page document with Kent's digital signature. He'd added $4,800 in administrative costs. That night I burned their notice in the fire pit, the paper curling orange against the lake's reflection. I filmed it, not for social media, but for record-keeping. My attorney, a calm man named Ben Adler who wore shirts with faint coffee stains, watched the clip and said, "Don't post it yet. Let them hang themselves first." Ben specialized in HOA compliance, the kind of law that's 90% boredom and 10% fireworks. He explained how we could use their overreach to set precedent. "They claim jurisdiction over the water," he said, tapping the plat map. "But look, no recorded transfer. They never owned it. They're trespassing every time they patrol it." We decided to let them keep writing letters. Every email, every fine, every threat. I logged by date and sender. I bought a small safe and labeled each folder. April 3rd, violation notice, April 7th, meeting agenda, April 12th, sheriff follow-up. My late wife would have smiled. She used to tease me about labeling spice jars by expiration date. At sunset, I paddled out to 2, a floating cabin, tightened the mooring ropes, and thought of her. She'd loved how the lake smelled like new rain on copper. "Keep it simple, Danny," she'd said once. "Don't let petty people make you small." The HOA didn't know I had the missing appendix. They didn't know I was an engineer who could read boundary surveys like novels. They didn't know I'd already spoken to a county ombuds who agreed to review the filings quietly. They thought I was just another homeowner who'd back down when threatened with a lien. I almost pitied them. Almost. When Kent posted a public notice on the community board, unauthorized structure subject to removal, 10-day notice effective April 28, I printed it and slid it into my binder under evidence. Then I wrote one sentence in my logbook. Countdown begins. The sun set red across the water, reflecting off the cabin windows like fire. Somewhere out there, justice had a timetable, and it had just started. On the morning of April 29th, a sound like a shovel against gravel woke me. I stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in the cold air, and saw 2 men in reflective vests dragging a yellow boom across the water. "Containment barrier," one shouted when I asked. "HOA order, environmental safety." The barrier would trap debris. My debris, apparently. It also cut my cabin off from the dock. I walked down to the waterline and started recording, narrating quietly for the file. Unpermitted obstruction installed by HOA contractors at 7:42 a.m. without owner consent. Kent appeared moments later, buttoned up in a navy windbreaker, clipboard in hand. "We warned you, Daniel, that structure is in violation." "It's a floating office, not a structure," I said. He smirked. "If it floats, it violates. Remove it by Friday, or we will." I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence unsettles bureaucrats more than shouting. That evening, I sent Ben this e-video. He replied within minutes, "Perfect. Leave it. Let them act. They just trespassed under 18-9-111, unlawful interference with private use." That evening, I sent Ben the video. He replied within minutes, "Perfect. Leave it. Let them act. They just trespassed under 18-9-111, unlawful interference with private use." By May 1st, letters from other homeowners began arriving. Some thanked me for standing up to the board. Others warned me to let it go before they make your life hell. My neighbor across the cove, Tom Weaver, a retired firefighter with arthritis and a heart as big as his old engine, walked over carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "They did this to me last year," he said. "Mailbox height, 2 inches off code, cost me $200. He sat on my porch rail, staring at the yellow boom. Kent's the kind who thinks rules make him taller. Tom became my mirror in all this, the friend who reminded me why restraint matters. He'd seen good people snap under petty pressure. "Document, don't detonate," he'd say. Still, the harassment thickened. Over the next week, I got 3 courtesy checks from county inspectors who claimed they'd received anonymous complaints about unsafe electrical work. The sheriff's deputy came again, same guy as before, Officer Larkin, and apologized as he left. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "off the record, they're abusing process. Keep your logs, I'll note the pattern." By May 6th, my mailbox held 7 violation notices, 1 wellness check form, and an invitation to a mandatory compliance hearing. They even sent a letter to my mortgage lender. Ben called it classic administrative warfare. Knowledge. Nugget number 2. In many states, HOAs may not contact your lender or insurer without substantiated cause. Doing so can constitute tortious interference, civilly actionable. The irony was rich. I'd spent 20 years designing drainage systems to prevent overreach, water lines, retention basins, all about balance. Yet here I was fighting for the right to float a 12 by 14-foot cabin on my own water. The hearing was set for May 10th. They wanted it in the clubhouse conference room, a beige box smelling of laminate and burnt coffee. I arrived early with Ben and a small rolling case of evidence binders. Kent and the board filed in like a jury in matching polos embroidered with the Echo Ridge logo. Kent opened with rehearsed authority. Mr. Hurst's unauthorized floating structure presents safety and aesthetic concerns for the community. Ben leaned forward. Before you proceed, please note for the record that Mr. Hurst's parcel retains pre-existing riparian rights under Appendix D, recorded 2003. I have certified copies here. Kent blinked. Appendix D doesn't exist. Ben smiled faintly. It does now. He slid the notarized document across the table. The sound of the binder clip snapping open echoed like a gunshot. For a second, nobody breathed. Kent's jaw tightened. We'll need to verify that with counsel. You should, Ben said. You might also review your authority to enter or alter that waterway. There's no recorded easement granting the HOA access. The board members exchanged looks. One whispered, "Is that true?" Kent shot him a glare. I didn't gloat. I just folded my hands, steady as a survey stake in clay. Inside, though, my pulse ticked like a metronome. Afterward, in the parking lot, Ben chuckled. You just watched a castle realize it's built on sand. The next day, Kent ordered another inspection, his last weapon. 2 HOA officers and a hired marine contractor tried to step onto my dock while I was away. Tom filmed it from his porch and texted me. Got the footage. Timestamp 2:14 p.m. They left when he shouted they were trespassing. I submitted a complaint to the county sheriff and copied the Department of Regulatory Agencies, citing unauthorized interference with riparian easement. Bureaucracy cuts both ways if you learn its rhythm. A few nights later, as I checked my mail, Kent walked up again, his voice low. You think you're clever, Daniel, but bylaws evolve. The board can amend definitions. Not retroactively, I said. Not over deeded property. He smirked. You're one homeowner. We're a community. I met his stare. Communities don't bully their members to look uniform. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, maybe doubt, maybe fear, but then he turned and walked back to his SUV. That was when I knew this was no longer about a floating cabin. It was about control. Halfway through May, Ben called with an idea that would become our quiet bombshell. Daniel, he said, what if you didn't just defend? What if you owned what they're using against you? He explained that the HOA's bylaws referenced maintenance of shared amenities, including the lake's retaining wall and spillway. If you bought the spillway parcel, he said, you'd control the maintenance right they depend on. Without your approval, they can't enforce waterway policies. How much? I asked. County records show it's still held by Echo Ridge Development Trust, delinquent on taxes, $1,127 outstanding. I didn't hesitate. Buy it. Ben laughed softly. You sure? I looked out across the water, the reflection of the cabin lights wavering like heartbeat lines. Positive. Let's see how they handle being guests on my water. That transaction, quiet, legal, and devastating, would become reversal number 1, but I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. By early June, I had the deed in a plain manila folder labeled Retaining Parcel 7B, Assignment of Maintenance Rights. I locked it in the safe beside Marcy's old wedding ring. The HOA kept pushing, blind to what was coming. They scheduled an emergency meeting of members for June 20th to vote on authorizing enforcement measures. It was open to all homeowners, which meant I could attend and speak. Ben smiled when I told him. Bring the deed, he said, but don't show it until they make their move. I nodded. Let them swing first. Tom offered to drive me that, at night. You might need backup, he said, his hand trembling as he poured coffee into his thermos. And I want front row seats when Goliath trips on his own paperwork. As the sun dropped behind the Rockies, I felt the air thicken with that electric calm before a storm, wind rattling the lake reeds, a screen door clapping somewhere down the shore. Inside the cabin, the deed lay under a single desk lamp, its county seal catching the light like a promise. 10 days left until the showdown. The days leading to June 20th felt like waiting for a storm you could already smell in the air. Kent sent 2 more letters, both stamped final warning, both quoting the same line about enforcement under Section 12. I read them carefully and smiled. Section 12 only applied to HOA-maintained property, which the spillway now wasn't. They didn't know they were citing language that no longer worked. I spent those days documenting everything. I measured the boom's placement, 62 feet from my dock, and photographed the faded serial number on the buoy line. I even recorded the water depth with a laser level. Ben said data makes truth heavier. Each file I named by date and meter reading, because that's how you win against people who live in committees. You outmeasure them. Tom came by almost every evening. We'd sit by the fire pit, watch the cabin lights flicker on the water. "You ever think you'd end up suing a homeowners association?" he asked once. I laughed. I design culverts for a living. Bureaucracy's my second language. Then quieter. But I promised Marcy this place would be peaceful. I just didn't think peace would need litigation. He nodded, poking the coals. Peace always needs maintenance. By June 15th, Ben had everything filed. The parcel assignment, the certified plat overlay, the acknowledgement of riparian rights. "We're ready," he said. "Just don't tip them off." Knowledge nugget number 3. When an HOA oversteps jurisdiction, recorded instruments like deeds and easements trump internal bylaws. County filings are public law, board rules are private agreements. The weekend before the meeting, something strange happened. The HOA Facebook group, normally a digital echo chamber, started to fracture. Screenshots arrived in my inbox from neighbors. One post read, "Why are we spending legal fees on one guy's cabin?" Another, "Anyone actually see the deed? Maybe he's right." Kent tried to stem it by posting, "Disinformation will not be tolerated." That phrase alone tripled the comments. Late that night, as rain whispered across the lake, I printed the posts, highlighting timestamps. Digital descent leaves footprints too. On June 18th, a courier dropped an envelope on my porch, unmarked except for a return address that matched the HOA's law firm. Inside was a draft lien notice, unsigned. They hadn't filed it yet. It was a threat meant to scare me before the meeting. I could smell the toner still warm from their printer. I called Ben. "They're bluffing." "Good," he said. "Let them." 2 days later, the clubhouse parking lot overflowed. Pickup trucks, minivans, sedans with faded stickers from the school district. They all came. The air was heavy with June heat and unspoken tension. Tom parked beside me and handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" "Just in case," he said. Inside was a thumb drive with every video he'd shot. Backups, multiple angles. If they try anything tonight, truth's on more than one device. We walked in together. The room buzzed like a hive, folding chairs scraping tile. Kent stood at the front beside a projector screen displaying emergency session, lake safety resolution. His smile looked stapled on. He called the meeting to order. "This association has suffered reputational harm and legal exposure due to one homeowner's actions." I sat in the third row, calm as a winter lake. He continued, "Therefore, we propose immediate removal of the unauthorized structure and recovery of associated costs through lien or legal action." A murmur rolled through the room. Someone whispered, "Is that even allowed?" Kent raised his hand for silence. "Any discussion?" I stood. "Yes." Every head turned. "Before you vote on enforcement," I said, "I'd like to clarify jurisdiction." Kent smirked. "You're out of order." "I'm well within order," I said, holding up a folded document. "This is the recorded deed for Parcel 7B, purchased on May 9, 2023, assigning maintenance rights for the spillway and lake perimeter." I unfolded it, the paper stiff with the county seal. "Meaning, this association no longer maintains the lake. Therefore, Section 12 doesn't apply." Gasps, murmurs, phones lifted for pictures. Kent's voice cracked. "That parcel can't be sold. It's community infrastructure. Ben, sitting quietly near the back, spoke up for the first time. It was never titled to the HOA, Mr. Wilmore. It remained with the Development Trust until my client acquired it legally. Here are the tax receipts. He walked forward, handing copies to two astonished board members. The sound of paper hitting the table was final, like a gavel. The HOA treasurer, a woman named Grace with a silver bun, squinted at the documents. "If this is true," she said slowly, "we don't have maintenance rights anymore. We can't enforce anything on that water." Kent's face drained of color. "We'll contest." "Please don't," Ben said. "The county clerk's record is time-stamped. Contesting it would mean admitting you've been collecting fees for property you don't own." The room broke into murmurs again, phones buzzing, whispers turning into open conversation. Someone shouted, "Then refund our lake fees!" I felt my chest loosen for two. The first time in months. As Kent tried to gavel the room back to order, the sound system popped, then crackled. The mic squealed, feedback slicing through the noise like lightning. He banged the podium. "Meeting adjourned until council review." People didn't move. They smelled blood, the bureaucratic kind. Tom leaned close. "That's one hell of a reversal, Danny." I smiled. "First one." As we stepped outside, the air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and stunned disbelief. Neighbors whispered in clusters. Some smiled at me. Others looked frightened, like seeing a map redraw itself. Ben shook my hand. "Next comes cleanup. They'll try to spin this. I'll be ready." We walked toward the cars, headlights streaking across the puddled lot. Behind us, Kent stood under the clubhouse awning, phone pressed to his ear, the rain making tiny rivers down his clipboard. He didn't know it yet, but that call wouldn't save him. It would document him. And by morning, the county ombudsman would have the footage, the deeds, the emails, and the timeline. The clock had turned. By dawn the next day, the HOA's group email chain was a battlefield. Some members demanded Kent's resignation. Others accused me of orchestrating a takeover. I didn't reply. Silence was my tactic now, and it worked better than any argument. At 9:12 a.m., my inbox pinged with a formal letter from the HOA attorney, Leonard Nash, Escrolla, a man whose tone always smelled like stale ink and billable hours. Pending investigation, all enforcement actions are suspended. The association reserves rights of appeal. Ben read it and grinned. Translation: they just realized they're standing on a frozen lake in spring. For the first time since this began, I went out to the cabin without glancing over my shoulder. The barrier line was still in the water, faded and half submerged, but it didn't bother me anymore. I stepped onto the deck, the HOA boards flexing under my boots, and opened the cabin's small window to let in the scent of wet pine. I'd built this place to think, and now it was working again. That afternoon, Tom came by with a bag of bolts and a grin. "If they won't maintain the lake, we will." He helped me secure a new ladder to the cabin, the kind Marcy had wanted, a simple aluminum frame that caught sunlight like a silver bookmark. We didn't talk much while we worked, just the sounds of wrenches and water and a distant lawnmower. When we finished, he handed me a cold soda from his cooler. "Feels like you bought back your peace," he said. I looked across the lake where kids were skipping stones again, where no one cared about paint codes or compliance clauses. "Feels like it," I said. "But Kent's not done. He can't stand losing control." Ben called that evening with confirmation. They've requested a special session with the county inspector next week, trying to frame your cabin as a navigational hazard. They want official validation. I exhaled slowly. "Good. Let's invite the inspector ourselves. I'll have my engineer's notes ready." He chuckled. "That's the spirit." Knowledge nugget number 4. Under most municipal codes, a navigational hazard designation requires proof of interference with established right-of-way or safety risk, verified by a neutral authority. Without that, it's just opinion. The night before the inspection, I went through every document again. I measured the cabin's distance from shore, 26 feet, well beyond any marked path. I checked the solar panel permits, the flotation specs, the anchor coordinates. I could have argued my case blindfolded. Still, I couldn't sleep. Marcy's picture sat on the shelf, a small smile frozen in time. I whispered to her like I used to before big project bids. "I'm doing this right. No shortcuts. No shouting." Her silence was the kind that steadies you. At 10 a.m. sharp, the county inspector arrived. A woman named Rachel Kim, mid-40s, ponytail tight, clipboard tucked under one arm. Behind her came Kent, his attorney Nash, and two HOA officers trying to look official in matching polos. Rachel extended her hand. "Mr. Hurst, I understand there's a question of jurisdiction and safety. Mind if I take some readings?" "Of course," I said. "All data's on the table." I handed her my engineering report, 6 pages of measurements, stamped and dated. She skimmed, raised an eyebrow. "You're thorough. Occupational hazard." Kent interjected. "Inspector Kim, the association maintains this lake and is responsible for safety compliance." Rachel looked up. "Do you have the maintenance deed?" Kent hesitated. "It's implied under the bylaws." "No," she said. "Property control has to be recorded. Do you have a filing number?" He blinked, jaw tightening. "We're in process of review." She turned to me. "And you?" I opened the manila folder, revealing the original deed stamped with the county seal. Parcel 7B, recorded May 9th. Maintenance rights duly transferred. Here's the acknowledgement letter from the county recorder. Rachel nodded, flipping through the pages. "Then legally, you're the maintenance authority here. That means your structure's jurisdiction falls under private property, not association regulation." Ben, standing a few paces back, gave me the faintest nod. Kent sputtered. "But the association, this is precedent. We can't have floating buildings everywhere." Rachel kept her tone cool. "Then you'll need to amend your CCRs through a proper vote and county review. You sue and retroactively enforce non-existent authority." The silence that followed was perfect. A bird landed on the railing. The lake rippled like it was listening. Tom, who'd wandered over just to watch, chuckled under his breath. "She's good." Rachel took a few photos, signed her inspection log, and handed copies to both parties. Findings: no safety hazard observed, structure compliant with local code. She turned to Kent. "You'll receive the report within 3 business days." Then to me, "Nice craftsmanship, Mr. Hurst. Enjoy your cabin." As her truck pulled away, Kent stood frozen, the clipboard trembling slightly in his grip. His attorney muttered something about appeal process, but even he sounded unconvinced. Neighbors had started to gather by then, watching from across the lawns. I heard someone clap, then another, until it rippled like small applause. Kent turned on me, voice low and bitter. "You think this ends here?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I think it just started somewhere better." That line stuck. I saw 2 people recorded on their phones. Within hours, clips appeared online. HOA president gets schooled by inspector, and comments flooded in. Some cheered, some debated. Which reminds me, what do you think? Should inspectors have more authority to override HOA overreach, or should communities self-police? Drop your thoughts below. I read every one. That evening, Ben called again. "You've gone viral, my friend. Channel metrics are blowing up." I laughed. Fame wasn't the plan. "Maybe not," he said, "but public light's the best disinfectant." As the sun dipped below the ridge, the yellow boom drifted loose and washed up on shore, useless now. I left it there, a souvenir of arrogance. But Kent wouldn't fade quietly. Power doesn't surrender, it regroups. And sure enough, 2 days later, I received notice of a special assessment prop. OSAL, a last-ditch attempt to raise funds for legal contingencies. It was scheduled for July 5th. Ben read it and whistled. They're going to burn what's left of their credibility. I looked out at the cabin, reflected gold in the twilight. Then let's light it properly. The July heat came early, making the air shimmer above the lake like it was holding its breath. The HOA mailed glossy flyers with bold red letters. Emergency Special Assessment. Protect our community. They wanted $300 from each homeowner to defend the association's authority. You could almost hear Kent's fingerprints on the font. Tom brought his copy over, folded like bad news. "They're squeezing folks who can barely pay their mortgages," he said. "Half this neighborhood's retirees on fixed income." I nodded. "They think fear raises money faster than facts." Ben and I spent the next few days prepping. We'd found something deeper than a bad vote, a pattern. The HOA had paid Kent's personal consulting firm, Wilmore Compliance Solutions, nearly $12,000 over 6 months for administrative assistance. No disclosure, no vote. A direct conflict of interest. Knowledge nugget number 5. Under most state nonprofit statutes, board members must disclose self-dealing and recuse from related votes. Failure to do so can void the transaction and trigger restitution. We also discovered their insurance carrier had quietly sent a warning letter about potential misrepresentation of authority. Ben grinned when he read it. Their coverage evaporates the moment misconduct's proven. Without it, the directors are personally liable. The retaliation came fast. On July 2nd, I woke to find my mailbox bent backward like someone had kicked it. The next morning, a noise complaint ticket was taped to my door. 7:13 p.m. Loud hammering. I hadn't even been home. Then came the online smear campaign. Anonymous posts on Nextdoor calling me the Lake Anarchist, implying I'd forged documents. One even claimed I'd threatened Kate. Completely false. I screenshotted everything, logged the timestamps, forwarded them to Ben. "Keep calm," he said. "Every attack adds another brick to our case." Still, the pressure worked on my nerves. One night, around midnight, I saw headlights pause at the end of my drive. I froze by the window, watching until they rolled away. My heart wouldn't slow for an hour. For the first time, I locked the door to the cabin and slept inside with a flashlight on the table. The next morning, Tom found me there. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just tired." He sat beside me on the dock. "You know, when I lost my house in '09, it wasn't the bank that broke me. It was the fear, coming home every day wondering what they'd take next." He looked at the water. "Don't let these people make you live like that." "I won't," I said, "but they're making a mistake. I'm the wrong guy to corner." The meeting on July 5th felt like a slow-motion ambush. The clubhouse was packed again, sweat and suspicion in the air. Kent opened with his usual sanctimony. "Our community's under attack by misinformation and legal threats. This assessment ensures we can defend our values." I sat quietly until he finished his speech about preserving harmony. Then I stood. "Harmony," I said. "You paid yourself $12,000 of association money without disclosure." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, someone muttering, "He's got proof?" Kent's face reddened. "That's a lie." Ben, sitting 2 rows back, spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have invoices, Mr. Wilmore, county filed, dates, amounts, and your EIN. Shall I read them?" The treasurer, Grace, snatched the papers Ben offered. Her lips tightened as she read. "Kent, did you—" He cut her off. "This is taken out of context. Those were consulting reimbursements." I raised my voice just enough. "Then where's the vote authorizing it? It's not in the minutes." Someone from the back shouted, "You took our money." The room splintered. Some demanded explanations. Others filmed. Kent's composure cracked. He slammed the gavel. "Out of order. This meeting is out of order." Ben leaned toward me. "They're imploding. Keep it factual." I held up a single sheet. "Here's the insurance carrier's letter warning of misrepresentation. If this board continues to act without authority, you'll lose coverage. Every homeowner here becomes financially exposed. Do you understand that?" That silenced the room. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to pause. Tom whispered, "You could hear a contract drop." I continued, calm and steady. "You don't need a special assessment. You need transparency. Demand an audit. Elect a new board. Restore trust." Someone clapped. Then another. It built like rain on a tin roof. Kent's voice trembled. "You're trying to destroy this community." "No," I said. "I'm trying to rebuild it." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Kent stormed out first, his papers fluttering like defeated flags. Grace stayed behind, talking quietly with homeowners. Ben gathered the documents back into his case. "That's your second reversal warming up," he said. Outside, under the fading sky, Tom and I watched the crowd linger. "You realize you've become the guy everyone quotes now," he said. "Half of them think you're crazy. The other half think you're their lawyer." I laughed softly. "I'll settle for neighbor." He smiled. "Then you'd better draft something for the new board, neighbor. They're gonna need direction." That night I stood on the dock, watching lightning far off over the hills. The air smelled of rain and copper again. I felt the fear finally start to break. But storms leave debris, and when they clear, you see what's still standing. By July 6, the HOA's power fractured like old plaster. Emails leaked. Grace resigned that morning. No drama, just a 3-line message. I cannot, in good conscience, continue serving under these circumstances. 2 more board members followed by evening. That left Kent and 1 loyalist clinging to titles nobody respected anymore. The homeowners started organizing informally. Picnics that turned into meetings, porch conversations that turned into reform committees. For the first time since I'd moved in, neighbors waved without suspicion. You could feel something shifting, something lighter. Ben called that night. "You've got leverage now, Daniel. The lake, the deed, the documentation, everything. They'll have to negotiate soon." "I'm ready," I said. He paused. "Just don't let vindication turn into vengeance. The best revenge is governance done right." He was right. Still, I wanted them held accountable, not crushed. 2 days later, Kent filed a complaint with the county zoning office claiming my cabin violated shoreline setback rules. It was his last bullet. The irony? The very maintenance authority he'd lost was required for him to have standing. The complaint bounced back in 48 hours. I didn't gloat. I just noted the timestamp and added it to the binder. Evidence wasn't about emotion. It was about order. That weekend, the local news station showed up. A young reporter named Alana Pierce knocked on my door. "Mr. Hurst, we've been following the Echo Ridge story. Mind if we ask some questions on record?" I looked at the lake, then back at her. "If we're talking law and reform, sure. No drama, though." The piece aired that Sunday. Engineer challenges HOA authority. Community divided. The camera caught me explaining the easement with my binder open, the wind ruffling the pages. It also caught Kent refusing to comment, slamming his car door. Within a day, the clip hit 200,000 views. My email flooded with messages, lawyers, homeowners, even a retired judge who said, "That's how you do it, document, don't detonate." But not all attention was friendly. Someone left a dead fish on my dock the next morning, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag with "Float This" written in marker. I didn't even flinch. I photographed it, called Officer Larkin, and filed it as Incident 37. He came out, looked tired, and said, "If this escalates, you've got enough for a harassment charge." I didn't want charges yet. I wanted resolution. By mid-July, the county ombudsman released an interim report confirming what we already knew. The HOA acted beyond its jurisdiction in matters concerning the lake and associated parcels. It also recommended board reformation and independent audit. That was the domino's first wobble. Then came the second. The HOA's insurance carrier, River Rock Mutual, sent out a letter to every homeowner. Coverage for directors' officers suspended pending review of potential governance violations. Translation: the board was personally exposed. Kent must have felt the floor vanish under him. Tom brought me a copy of the letter with a grin. "They're done. Toasted." "Almost," I said, "but we still need to formalize reform." Ben drafted a proposal, a reform deal in exchange for me releasing all civil claims. It included term limits for board members, public posting of minutes within 7 days, an independent ethics committee, fee rollback to pre-2019 levels, and an annual open audit. It was ironclad, fair, and lawful. Visual beat number 1. That night, I spread all the documents across my dining table, the deed, the inspection reports, the audit clauses, and stamped each one with a red filed seal. The ink bled slightly on the paper, bright as closure. When Ben saw the photos, he said, "That's your evidence tableau. Keep it. Someday a journalist will frame it." 2 days later, the HOA announced a General Assembly for July 25th to discuss community restructuring. It was the public set PI. Each we'd been waiting for. Ben and I prepped for it like trial lawyers. He rehearsed my statement, tightening every phrase until it could cut glass. "Stay calm," he reminded me. "Let the facts swing for you." The night before, Tom stopped by with his thermos of coffee. "Feels like the last inning," he said. "Yeah," I said, watching lightning flicker over the ridge. "But in this game, we bat last." He chuckled. "Then make it count." The next morning I dressed like I was heading to court, pressed shirt, clean folder, steady breath. Marcy's wedding ring glinted in the safe when I locked it, a reminder of what she'd wanted. Peace built on integrity. At the clubhouse, the crowd overflowed onto the lawn. Folding chairs, cameras, murmurs of expectation. Rachel Kim, the county inspector, stood near the front again, neutral authority embodied in a clipboard and calm. Even the sheriff's department had sent an observer, just in case. Kent sat at the head table, eyes red-rimmed, his authority hanging by threads. As I stepped up to the microphone, the hum of the fans filled the silence. I placed my binder on the podium, opened it to the deed, and began. 2 months ago, I was fined for a structure that was never under HOA control. Today, I stand here not to gloat, but to propose a way forward, one grounded in law, not intimidation. Cameras clicked. Kent's pen tapped nervously. Behind him, the HOA banner fluttered in the ceiling fan's breeze, the logo barely holding its adhesive. The confrontation everyone had waited for was seconds away. I could feel the room vibrating. Anger, curiosity, exhaustion all braided together. I took one slow breath and let my voice drop into that register people lean toward. I've lived here 3 years, paid every fee, fixed my mailbox after their trucks clipped it. I've watched this place forget what a neighborhood is supposed to mean. Raxi. Heel Kim, clipboard in hand, stood beside the front row. She'd agreed to attend as a neutral witness. "Proceed, Mr. Hurst," she said softly, "for the record." I held up the deed again. "The county has confirmed these parcels fall outside HOA jurisdiction. The association spent our fees litigating authority it never possessed. It's time we acknowledge the facts and start repairing trust." Kent leaned into his microphone. "This man wants to dismantle the HOA, to throw away everything we've built." I turned toward him. "Everything you've built was fear, fines, and favoritism. You called the sheriff on a homeowner exercising recorded rights. You billed residents for your own consulting firm. You erased records. That's not community. It's a cartel with lawn ornaments." The room erupted. Applause drowned his attempt to answer. Rachel raised her hand for quiet, then spoke for the official record. "I've reviewed the county filings and the inspection results. The structure and parcel transfer are valid. The association no longer maintains legal control of the lake or its access features." Her words landed like a verdict. Even Kent's attorney sank back in his chair. Tom, leaning against the back wall, mouthed, "It's done." I turned a page in my binder, revealing the reform proposal. "What I'm offering is simple. I hold the leverage now. Ownership of the spillway and maintenance rights. I could revoke all access and let this lake die. Instead, I'm proposing we trade leverage for reform." A hush fell so complete you could hear paper settling. "These are the terms," I said. 1. 3-year term limits for board members. 2. Public posting of minutes and budgets. 3. Creation of an independent ethics committee elected by homeowners, not appointed. 4. Rollback of all special assessments since 2019. 5. An annual third-party audit posted online. In exchange, I'll transfer shared maintenance back to the reformed HOA at zero cost. Gasps, murmurs, then a swell of approval. Grace, no longer on the board, stood up from the crowd. "That is fair. That's what we should have been." Kent's voice cracked. "You can't dictate policy." Ben stepped forward, calm and unflinching. "He's not dictating. He's offering a contract, one that heals this mess without litigation. You refuse, and he exercises property rights. You accept, and everyone wins." Rachel Kim nodded once. "That's lawful." Kent's last ally whispered something, then quietly slid his folder away and stood up to leave. That small act broke whatever illusion of control Kent had left. He slammed the gavel. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this when—" "Enough," I said quietly. "The days of yelling fines into mailboxes are over." That line was caught perfectly by the news cameras. Later, it would loop on social media over and over. Kent froze, jaw trembling. "You don't understand governance." "Neither did you," I replied. Rachel gestured toward the homeowners. "Under Colorado's Common Interest Ownership Act, you can vote now. Simple majority to adopt reforms." Hands went up across the room, fast, decisive, unashamed. I counted roughly 70%. It was over. Kent dropped the gavel, turned, and walked out the side door. The echo of it hitting the floor was louder than his departure. Visual beat number 2. Rachel walked up to the podium, stamped the vote record with her county seal, and handed it back to me. The red emblem gleamed under the fluorescent lights, law validating truth. Ben exhaled. "Congratulations, Daniel. That's the domino collapse." Tom laughed. "Never seen tyranny die by paperwork before." But the aftermath wasn't loud. It was quiet, like when a storm ends and you realize what it took with it. People started hugging, exchanging numbers, talking about repainting the clubhouse, hosting a lake cleanup. Real community things. That night, I sat by the cabin window, rain pattering softly, watching ripples from a single trout dare the dock light. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Meeting certified. Reforms valid. You did good, Mr. Hurst." I smiled, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the lake settle into my chest. Online, the debate had already begun. Comments under the news clip argued both sides. Finally, someone stood up to HOA tyranny. Rules exist for a reason. Chaos without them. Which side are you on? Should homeowners have the right to rewrite their HOA when power gets abused, or should boards remain untouchable to preserve order? Leave your thoughts, or at least like the video, because these stories are more real than you'd believe. Outside, thunder rolled far off in the mountains. Tomorrow would bring paperwork and cleanup and likely a few threats in my inbox. But for now, the air felt clean again. Marcy's photo on the shelf caught a glint of lightning. I whispered, "We're getting there, love. Almost home." The morning after the vote, the lake looked different. It wasn't the light, it was the silence. For the first time in months, no one was measuring my dock or photographing my trash cans. Birds nested in the reeds, kids tossed pebbles from the shore, and somewhere behind me, the faint sound of hammering signaled neighbors repairing instead of reporting. By noon, the news vans were gone, leaving tire marks in the gravel like ghosts of the old regime. The homeowners formed a transition group in the clubhouse, and they asked me to attend as technical advisor. I went, not as the rebel they'd painted me, but as a neighbor ready to help rebuild. Grace chaired the session, notebook in hand. "We'll need a temporary committee," she said, looking up at me, "and we'd like you to draft the new ethics charter." I hesitated. "I'm not looking to run anything." She smiled. "We don't need a ruler, we need a record keeper." That felt right, so I agreed. Ben came by later that day with the final paperwork. "Here it is," he said, laying out the documents. "Reversal number 2, the reform deal officially recorded." He pointed to each page. "Sign here, here, and here. The transfer of maintenance rights back to the community, contingent on the reforms you outlined." I signed each line slowly, feeling the weight lift with every stroke of the pen. When I finished, he stamped the last page with a satisfying click. Visual beat number 3. The camera from the local station caught that moment perfectly, the stamp pressing down, the ink spreading like a sunrise across the word agreed. Ben grinned. "You did it. No lawsuits, no shouting, just law and patience." Tom stopped by that evening with 2 beers and a grin so wide it crinkled his eyes. "Whole neighborhood's buzzing," he said. "They're already talking about a community day next month. Potluck, cleanup, music by the lake. You'll give the first speech." I laughed. "I'm not giving speeches anymore." He shrugged. "Too late. You're the reason this place has one heartbeat again." As the sun slid behind the ridge, the new board released its first statement online. Effective immediately, Echo Ridge HOA will operate under a transparency and accountability charter. Independent audit scheduled for September. All prior enforcement actions suspended pending review. Within hours, homeowners who'd been silent for years began posting photos. Flower beds, porches, barbecue setups, captioned, "Finally free to breathe again." A week later, Kent's resignation appeared as a single line in the county filings. Director Wilmore terminated by consent decree, restitution pending. River Rock Mutual issued an update noting corrective cooperation achieved, and the HOA's coverage quietly resumed under new management. That was accountability, not revenge. The Ombudsman's office sent me a formal letter of thanks for constructive participation in community reform. I framed it next to Marcy's picture. She'd have rolled her eyes at all the fuss, then smiled that quiet smile that used to make my shoulders drop. By August, the floating cabin wasn't a battleground anymore. It was just a cabin. I used it for design work, and sometimes just to watch the light shift across the water. One evening, a pair of teenagers paddled up in a canoe. "Hey, Mr. Hurst," one said, "is it true you beat the HOA?" I smiled. No, I outlasted them until they remembered who they were supposed to be. They grinned, paddled off, and their laughter echoed across the lake like something healed. Weeks later, we held the first Echo Ridge Community Day. Neighbors brought casseroles and folding chairs. Kids painted signs that said, "One lake, one community." I gave a short speech, just a few lines about balance, law, and decency. Then I handed the microphone to Grace, who led the crowd in voting to establish a scholarship fund for local engineering students, Marcy's old field. That's how change should look, a ripple becoming a current. After the event, I stood by the water with Tom, the air smelling of grilled corn and summer dusk. He nudged me. "You ever gonna tell me what you wrote in that notebook you always carry?" I opened it and read the last entry aloud. "Peace isn't the absence of rules. It's the presence of fairness." He smiled. "Frame that too." The news piece aired one last time, closing with footage of the lake at sunset and my voice saying, "You can fight hard without fighting dirty." It ended with the line, "Echo Ridge adopts historic HOA reforms after legal showdown." If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories find you first. And as responsible citizens, share this one, because someone out there is still afraid to open their mailbox. That's on us to change. Months later, the lake froze over, smooth and silver. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the reflection of my cabin lights on the ice. For the first time since Marcy's passing, I felt peace, not as memory, but as presence. Then the phone buzzed, a message from Ben. "Another HOA in Boulder County wants advice. You in?" I smiled, typing back one line. "Always. Next case."